Introducing the African Diaspora News Channel app, your gateway to stories that's overlooked by the corporate mainstream media.
And we serve as the voice to the global Black community.
Again, we got Dr. Candace Matthews.
A lot of these documents, looking at.
This country is supposed to be about the land of the free for all. It has not been free for Black people, and we are tired.
With our platform, we're helping to end injustice by exposing it.
Join us in standing for excellence in journalism and serving our community. Download the African Diaspora News app today.
Peace, family. My name is Vicki Dillard for African Diaspora News Channel. Thank you so much for tuning in. Be sure to give us a big thumbs up and share the broadcast. Family, let me get right to where we're going today. Yes? First of all, I want you to look at this headline that just came out. Of course, the fallout with illegal immigration amongst so many different people groups here in the United States has taken on a life of its own. Yes? Well, beloved, this headline from New York Times that just came out, headline, concerns grow over dire conditions in immigrant detention. The subtitle says, mass immigration arrests have led to overcrowding in detention facilities with reports of unsanitary and inhumane conditions. Now listen to a little bit of this, okay, family? It's written by a couple of different writers, Miriam Jordan and Jasmine Aloha. It says, far from public view, the toll of the Trump administration's crackdown on immigration is unfolding in overcrowded detention facilities across the country. Some immigrants have gone a week or more without showers. Others sleep pressed tightly together on bare floors. Medications for diabetes, high blood pressure, and other chronic health problems are often going unprovided. In New York and Los Angeles, people have been held for days in cramped rooms designed for briefing processing, not prolonged confinement. And their lawyers and family members have remained in the dark about their whereabouts. It goes on to say that the nation's immigration detention system is buckling under the weight of record numbers as the Trump administration intensifies enforcement agenda with raids on workplaces and arrests on immigration courts. More than 56,000 immigrants were in government custody on June 15th, exceeding the current capacity of 41,000. Now, of course, the article goes on. I won't bore you with the other details, but I wanted to give you enough to know what we're working with here. Here you have Americans overly concerned about folks that are criminals, that violated the law. How many of y'all know that's what you call people that violated the law? I know y'all come up with cute little names for them like dreamers, their children and stuff like that, but that's not right because you don't come up with those names for petty and nonviolent crimes for those of us that are Americans. Why should we understand what you're saying when many of us have been on the front line of injustices with ourselves personally, as well as many of our family members and loved ones? Now, even when I use the names Ray and Keisha and stuff like that, some of you all out there with your poor little ignorant little terrible little selves will say, Vicki, that's a stereotype against Black folks. No, it's a stereotype against Black folks if I'm saying we did something bad. I'm using those names because they're typically associated with our community. And I'm saying that if they don't do nothing like that for those of us with such names that don't commit major crimes, then why should we care about Rosa and Javier? So stop misusing your intelligence. Some of y'all out there, it ain't that many of y'all, most of y'all are intelligent enough to know better, but the handful of y'all that may be thinking like that, some of those stereotypes, no. The stereotype is the name to say those associated with our community that don't get mercy. Not because I'm saying they actually did something wrong. You see how you got to keep your mind right? And how you didn't go right with your mind on that alleged stereotype? Now, I know I went off on that, but let's get back to the topic. Why am I bringing this up? You all know that before Kamala Harris ran for president this last time, you all know that I was on her. I was on multiple other networks before. Even I was on here on African Diaspora News Channel. Even when I was on some of the other networks, I was here on African Diaspora News Channel. Yes? And I was calling her out. Some of you all are new to this. Some of you all are only talking about her because she ran for president a few years ago. I've been on her. Yes? Well, in this headline from July 2020, this was years after Kamala Harris served as California's Attorney General, this headline, but this was them covering her because at the time, obviously, she was running for president. That was the first time, right? This is before this last time, before Joe Biden brought her on. What does this headline say? It says, or should I say before, no, let me get my facts right. Before she got out the race. That's what I should say. Before she got out the race and decided that she was going to be his vice president, and before she ran this last time against Donald Trump. Yes? And lost. Let's be clear. She was losing before she quit with Joe Biden the first time around. Just FYI. This headline from the American Prospect says how Kamala Harris fought to keep nonviolent prisoners locked up. I'm going to say it again. This was not illegal immigration. So do you see how this has been an issue with this woman many, many years ago? But in 2020, they discussed it because she was running for president. So obviously it was relevant. I'm saying I don't want to talk about criminals until we get to Americans. It says as California Attorney General, she spent years, subverting a 2011 Supreme Court ruling requiring the state to reduce its prison population. Do you all understand it? I've been on Kamala Harris for many years. The reason why this is relevant because Kamala Harris is Attorney General, which means she's an attorney and she works with a bunch of attorneys. These are the people that are supposed to be your law keepers and not your lawbreakers. These are supposed to be your lawmakers and not your lawbreakers. Well, her in that high level position, her in her office, but all their legal expertise and credentials and access to state, local, and federal government, even though she works on behalf of the state, she was bucking against the 2011 Supreme Court decision, so much so that the courts legitimately considered holding Kamala Harris and her office in contempt of court. Contempt of court means you violated the law. Y'all understand that? So some of y'all out there screaming and hollering for Kamala. She's a puppet and a lawbreaker. She's a cute person that will get us in war and devastation. But the first war she had was on Black people in America that were citizens. You understand? Yeah, I'm slinging this curly braids all over the platform today. Are y'all listening? Real quick. A leading candidate to be Joe Biden's running mate, which I already said, that repeatedly and openly defied U.S. Supreme Court orders to reduce overcrowding in California prisons while serving as the state attorney general. According to legal documents reviewed by The Prospect, working in tandem with Governor Jerry Brown, Harris and her legal team filed motions that were condemned by judges and legal experts as obstructionist, bad faith, and nonsensical, at one point even suggesting that the Supreme Court lacked the jurisdiction to order a reduction in California's prison population. This is how devilish she was. Not against the illegal migrants, but against us. Disproportionately us. Y'all understand that? Do y'all understand why it's upsetting when I see folks from the diaspora sitting up there having more sympathy for other folks, but you don't have any of that same energy for us? I got to give you the history. Now, this article is too long, but just real quick. It says the extreme resistance to the Supreme Court ruling was done to prevent the release of fewer than 5,000 nonviolent offenders who multiple courts have cleared as presenting next to no risk of recidivism, that means return to prison, or threat to public safety. Kamala Harris was fighting to keep disproportionately Black Americans and other melanated people in prison. People that courts determined presented little to no risk of returning to prison, and there were no threat to public safety. So I don't want to hear nothing about this other stuff until we get to this. Why am I bringing this up? I want to give you a couple more things here. Why did the Supreme Court make such a decision, y'all? And why did the person that wrote the majority opinion for the Supreme Court in that issue, why did a conservative do that? Y'all know darn well that the Supreme Court, they don't have liberal judges and conservative judges that typically come together on stuff. Well, a conservative Supreme Court justice agreed of the egregious conditions of the California prisons against Americans. I can't read all this to you right now, but guess what? It says, despite a straightforward directive from the Supreme Court to identify prisons for release over a 2-year period, upholding a 2009 ruling that mandated the same action over the same time line, the state spent the majority of their time seesawing back and forth between dubious legal filings and flagrant disregard. I'm going to skip y'all. It says, while Harris's ultimately unsuccessful presidential campaign saw questions raised about her criminalization of truancy and her tough-on-crime reputation during her time as San Francisco's district attorney, her role in California's prison reduction case largely flew under the radar. Not for me, because Vicki was on it. I'm going to skip. It says, the federal court seldom look to prisoner release, which I know as a remedy of last resort. That means I never believe in letting prisoners go. But your prison must have been real bad when you got a conservative and liberal saying, ma'am, reduce the prison population against Americans. And she said, hell to the now. It says at its height, it was stuffed to some 200% of its design capacity. There were not enough beds or medical personnel, but an extreme excess of bodies. In one prison, 54 prisoners shared a single toilet. But Americans. Preventable deaths due to substandard and overstretched medical care occurred every 5 to 6 days. Suicidal inmates were locked in telephone booth-sized cages for 24 hours at a time. For nearly 2 decades, Republican and Democratic administrations essentially ignored the problem, despite constitutional protections for prisoners against cruel and unusual punishment enshrined in the Bill of Rights. Finally, in 2009, a federal court found that no other plausible solution existed for getting the state to conform to a constitutionally reasonable standard than a forced prisoner release. Why am I bringing it up? For Black Americans disproportionately in California, for example, the Supreme Court ordered your American lady that was running for president to release prisoners, but her and the governor and other legal officials, not just Kamala, but it says both Republican and Democrat for years, didn't do diddly about it. Unless until my people get restitution for this madness, and unless until the rest of my people are released in such similarly situated situations all over America, because y'all do know America imprisons more prisoners than the top developing countries in the world combined. Y'all do know that, right? I don't want to hear nothing about that other stuff right now. And no intelligent person in America or around the world that's in their right mind can disagree with me unless you're an unjust individual and a devil. My name is Vicki Dillard, beloved. I have an upcoming free webinar Monday, July 14th. That's Monday, July 14th. Don't you miss it. It's free. Go to my website at vickiplanet.com. I'm going to be breaking down the BRICS shifts about the New World Order and how money and war go together. You all know there's a major uprising throughout the Middle East. I'm going to tell you what that's all about. And I'm going to show you connections to foundational Black Americans. I know you all saying that's a war over there in the world, but this war affects your world. And before you start running your mouth to sound crazy, come to my free webinar to learn how and what you can do about it. There's a spiritual connection and there's a natural connection. vickiplanet.com, that's my website. Share the broadcast. I can't wait to see you.